For my brother's birthday, they rented a lake house, hired a chef, and invited all his friends.
For mine?
A store-bought cupcake and a card that said, "Maybe next year." When I said nothing, my mom smirked, "Don't be so sensitive." I just took a photo of their gift and booked a flight. That night, my dad texted, "Where did you go?" The flickering candlelight of a single, sad-looking cupcake cast long, dancing shadows across the dining room table, illuminating the stark contrast between my brother's birthday celebration and my own. Just a few weeks ago, this very room had been filled with the boisterous laughter of his friends, the clinking of glasses, and the tantalizing aroma of a gourmet meal prepared by a private chef. For his 25th, my parents had spared no expense, renting a sprawling lake house for the weekend, complete with a pontoon boat, jet skis, and a fully catered barbecue. I had watched from the sidelines, a ghost in my own home, as my brother, the golden child, basked in the warmth of their adoration. He had always been the sun to my moon, the one who effortlessly commanded attention, while I remained in the shadows, a quiet observer of his charmed life. I had long since accepted my role as the supporting character in his story, the quiet, unassuming daughter who never asked for much and was therefore rarely given anything. But this year, something shifted within me. A quiet rebellion began to stir in the depths of my soul, a yearning for a sliver of the recognition that was so freely lavished upon him. I had dared to hope, to dream, that for my 23rd birthday, they might finally see me, truly see me, not just as an extension of my brother, but as a person in my own right, with my own hopes, my own dreams, my own desires. I had dropped subtle hints for weeks, mentioning a new restaurant I was eager to try, a weekend getaway to the coast I had been dreaming of, a simple, heartfelt celebration with the people I loved most. My pleas, however, had fallen on deaf ears, lost in the cacophony of their adoration for my brother. And so, here I was, on the eve of my 23rd birthday, staring at a single, store-bought cupcake, its frosting already starting to melt under the heat of the lone candle. My mother, with a smirk that sent a shiver down my spine, placed a card on the table beside the cupcake. "Happy birthday, sweetie," she had chirped, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that did little to mask the condescending tone that lay beneath. I had opened the card, my heart a leaden weight in my chest, to find a generic, store-bought sentiment and a hastily scrawled message from my father, "Maybe next year, kiddo." The words had been a punch to the gut, a cruel reminder of my perpetual state of insignificance. I had looked up at my mother, my eyes pleading with her to understand, to see the hurt that was so clearly etched on my face. But she had simply shrugged, her smirk widening into a full-blown grin. "Don't be so sensitive," she had chided, her words a dagger to my already wounded heart. "It's just a birthday." But it wasn't just a birthday. It was a lifetime of feeling invisible, of being a second-class citizen in my own family, of watching my brother receive the love and affection that I so desperately craved. It was the culmination of years of quiet resentment, of swallowed tears, of a heart that had been slowly, methodically, broken. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The quiet, unassuming daughter who had always been so eager to please, so desperate for their approval, vanished, replaced by a woman who was no longer willing to be a doormat. I had taken out my phone, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and adrenaline, and snapped a photo of the pathetic little cupcake and the cruel, dismissive card. I had then, without a word, turned and walked out of the room, leaving my mother standing there, her smirk finally faltering, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. I had gone straight to my room, my heart pounding in my chest, and booked the first flight I could find to a place I had always dreamed of visiting, a place where I could be anonymous, a place where I could finally, truly, be myself. As the confirmation email had landed in my inbox, a sense of liberation had washed over me, a feeling of pure, unadulterated freedom. I had packed a small bag, my hands moving with a sense of purpose I had never known before, and slipped out of the house under the cover of darkness, leaving behind a lifetime of hurt and disappointment. I had not known where I was going, or what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I had felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of possibility, a belief that I was the author of my own story, and that I had the power to write a new ending, one that was filled with love, with adventure, with a sense of self-worth that had been so cruelly denied to me for so long. That night, as I sat in a sterile airport hotel room, thousands of miles from the life I had so desperately wanted to escape, my phone had buzzed with a text from my father. "Where did you go?" he had asked, his words a hollow echo of a concern that had come far too late. I had stared at the message for a long time, a bitter smile playing on my lips. I had not replied. I had simply turned off my phone, a symbolic act of severing the ties that had bound me for so long, and looked out at the city lights, a vast, glittering expanse of possibility stretching out before me. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I was excited to find out. The next few days had been a blur of new experiences, of unfamiliar sights and sounds, of a sense of freedom that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had wandered through the bustling streets of a foreign city, a stranger in a strange land, yet I had never felt more at home. I had eaten at street-side cafes, savoring the flavors of a cuisine I had never tasted before, and I had lost myself in the labyrinthine alleyways of an ancient market, the vibrant colors and exotic scents a feast for my senses. I had visited museums and art galleries, marveling at the beauty and creativity of the human spirit, and I had spent hours simply sitting in a park, watching the world go by, a silent observer of the human drama that unfolded before me. I had spoken to no one, and no one had spoken to me, and yet, I had never felt less alone. I had been surrounded by the energy of a city that was teeming with life, with a sense of anonymity that was both comforting and empowering. I had been free to be whoever I wanted to be, to shed the skin of the quiet, unassuming daughter I had been for so long, and to embrace the woman I was becoming, a woman who was strong, who was independent, who was the master of her own destiny. But even in the midst of my newfound freedom, the ghosts of my past had continued to haunt me. I had found myself replaying the events of my birthday over and over again in my mind, the hurt and anger a constant, dull ache in my heart. I had tried to push the memories away, to focus on the present, on the new life I was building for myself, but they had clung to me like a shadow, a constant reminder of the pain I had left behind. One evening, as I sat in a small, dimly lit jazz club, listening to the soulful strains of a saxophone, a wave of sadness had washed over me, so powerful that it had taken my breath away. I had thought of my brother, of the easy, effortless way he had always commanded our parents' attention, of the way they had always looked at him with a mixture of pride and adoration, a look they had never once bestowed upon me. I had wondered if he had ever known, if he had ever cared, that his very existence had cast a long, dark shadow over my own. I had wondered if he had ever felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of remorse, for the way he had so easily, so thoughtlessly, accepted the love and affection that had been so cruelly denied to me. I had taken out my phone, my fingers hovering over his name and my contacts list, my heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. I had wanted to call him, to scream at him, to demand to know why he had never stood up for me, why he had never once used his golden child status to advocate for his own sister. But I had known, with a certainty that was both heartbreaking and liberating, that it would have been a futile gesture. He would have offered a half-hearted apology, a placating platitude, and then he would have changed the subject, eager to return to the comfortable, uncomplicated world he had always inhabited. He would have never understood, he would have never been able to comprehend, the depth of my pain, the years of quiet suffering I had endured. And so, I had put my phone away, a silent vow to myself that I would no longer waste my energy on a family that had never truly valued me. I would no longer be a victim of their neglect, a prisoner of their indifference. I would be the architect of my own happiness, the creator of my own destiny. I would build a life for myself that was so full of love, of joy, of purpose, that the ghosts of my past would have no choice but to fade into oblivion. The next day, I had woken up with a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to not just survive, but to thrive. I had enrolled in a language class, eager to immerse myself in the culture of my new home, and I had started volunteering at a local animal shelter, the unconditional love of the abandoned and neglected animals a balm to my wounded soul. I had made new friends, a diverse and eclectic group of people from all walks of life, who had accepted me for who I was, without judgment, without expectation. They had seen the strength and resilience that lay beneath my quiet exterior, and they had celebrated the woman I was becoming, a woman who was no longer afraid to speak her mind, to stand up for herself, to demand the love and respect she so rightfully deserved. And then, one day, as I was sitting in a cafe, sipping on a latte and reading a book, a man had approached my table, a shy smile on his face. He had introduced himself as a local artist, and he had asked if he could sketch my portrait. I had been taken aback, a blush creeping up my cheeks, but there had been something in his eyes, a kindness, a gentleness, that had put me at ease. I had agreed, and as he had sat across from me, his charcoal pencil flying across the page, we had talked for hours, about art, about life, about our hopes and our dreams. He had told me about his passion for capturing the beauty of the human spirit, for finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, and I had told him about my own journey of self-discovery, of my escape from a life of quiet desperation, of my quest to find my own voice in a world that had always tried to silence me. When he had finished, he had turned the sketchbook around, and I had gasped. He had captured not just my physical likeness, but the very essence of my soul. He had seen the strength in my eyes, the resilience in my smile, the quiet determination that had carried me through so much pain. He had seen the woman I was becoming, the woman I had always been, buried beneath layers of hurt and disappointment. In that moment, I had known, with a certainty that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that I was falling in love. And as he had walked me home that evening, our hands brushing against each other, a silent promise passing between us, I had known that I had finally found what I had been searching for all along, a love that was not based on obligation, on expectation, on a desperate need for approval, but on a deep and profound connection, a mutual respect, a shared understanding of the beauty and the fragility of the human heart. The next few months had been a whirlwind of romance, of passion, of a love that was so pure, so all-consuming, that it had healed the broken pieces of my heart. We had explored the city together, hand in hand, discovering hidden gems in secret alleyways, and we had spent long, lazy afternoons in his art studio, the scent of turpentine and oil paint filling the air, as I had watched him create magic on a canvas. He had painted me over and over again, each portrait a love letter to the woman he saw in me, a woman who was strong, who was beautiful, who was worthy of love. And as I had looked at the paintings, I had finally started to see myself through his eyes, to believe in the woman he had captured on canvas. I had started to shed the last vestiges of my old self, the quiet, unassuming daughter who had always been so desperate for her family's approval, and I had embraced the woman I was becoming, a woman who was confident, who was passionate, who was no longer afraid to take up space in the world. But even as I had been building a new life for myself, a life that was so full of love and happiness that it had once seemed like an impossible dream, the ghosts of my past had continued to linger. I had received a barrage of texts and voicemails from my parents, their initial confusion turning to anger, their anger to a desperate, pleading tone that had done little to move me. They had demanded to know where I was, what I was doing, why I had left without a word. They had accused me of being selfish, of being ungrateful, of breaking their hearts. They had tried to guilt me into coming home, to manipulate me with promises of a better future, a future where they would finally see me, where they would finally love me. But I had known, with a certainty that was both heartbreaking and liberating, that their promises were empty, that their words were hollow. They had not changed. They had simply been forced to confront the consequences of their own actions, and they had not liked what they had seen. They had not missed me. They had missed the quiet, unassuming daughter who had always been so eager to please, so desperate for their approval. They had missed the doormat they had so carelessly, so thoughtlessly, wiped their feet on for so many years. I had not replied to their messages. I had not answered their calls. I had simply continued to build my new life, a life that was so far removed from the pain and disappointment of my past that it had felt like a different lifetime. And then, one day, I had received a letter, a thick, cream-colored envelope with my brother's familiar, scrawling handwriting on the front. I had stared at it for a long time, my heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. I had wanted to throw it away, to burn it, to pretend that it had never arrived. But a small, nagging voice in the back of my mind had urged me to open it, to read what he had to say, to finally, once and for all, close the door on a chapter of my life that had caused me so much pain. With trembling hands, I had opened the letter, and as I had read his words, the tears had started to fall, hot and fast, down my cheeks. He had not offered a half-hearted apology, a placating platitude. He had not tried to make excuses for our parents' behavior, for his own complicity in my suffering. He had simply, honestly, and with a rawness that had taken my breath away, told me that he was sorry. He had told me that he had been blind, that he had been selfish, that he had taken my presence in his life for granted. He had told me that he had never realized, until I was gone, how much I had meant to him, how much he had loved me. He had told me that he had confronted our parents, that he had forced them to see the truth of their actions, the depth of the pain they had caused me. He had told me that they were heartbroken, that they were lost without me, that they would do anything, to have me back in their lives. He had not asked me to come home. He had not asked me to forgive him. He had simply asked for a chance to be the brother he should have been all along, a chance to build a new relationship, a relationship that was based on love, on respect, on a mutual understanding of the beauty and the fragility of the human heart. I had read the letter over and over again, the words a balm to my wounded soul. I had not known what to do, what to think, what to feel. I had been so sure that I had closed the door on my past, that I had moved on, that I had left my family behind for good. But his words, his heartfelt, genuine, and deeply moving words, had opened a crack in that door, a sliver of light in the darkness of my past. I had not replied to his letter. Not yet. I had needed time to think, to process, to decide what I wanted, what I needed, what was best for me. But for the first time in a long time, I had felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of possibility, a belief that maybe, just maybe, it was not too late to heal the wounds of the past, to build a new future, a future where I was not just a survivor, but a thriver, a woman who had faced the darkness and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than ever before. A few weeks later, as I was walking through the park with the man I had come to love, the man who had shown me what it meant to be truly seen, to be truly loved, I had made a decision. I had taken out my phone, my heart pounding in my chest, and I had called my brother. We had talked for hours, the words tumbling out of us, a torrent of emotions that had been bottled up for far too long. We had cried, we had laughed, we had shared our hopes and our fears, our dreams and our disappointments. We had talked about our childhood, about the good times and the bad, about the moments of joy and the moments of pain. We had talked about our parents, about their flaws and their virtues, about the love and the hurt they had caused us. We had talked about the future, about the kind of relationship we wanted to have, the kind of family we wanted to be. It had not been easy. There had been moments of anger, of resentment, of a pain that was so deep that it had felt like it would never heal. But there had also been moments of understanding, of forgiveness, of a love that was so strong that it had transcended all the hurt and the disappointment. By the end of the conversation, something had shifted between us. The wall that had stood between us for so long had crumbled, replaced by a bridge of understanding, of compassion, of a shared desire to heal the wounds of the past and to build a new future, a future where we were not just siblings, but friends, allies, soulmates. I had not promised to come home. I had not promised to forgive our parents. I had simply promised to keep the lines of communication open, to continue the conversation, to take it one day at a time. And as I had hung up the phone, a sense of peace had washed over me, a feeling of closure that I had never thought possible. I had looked at the man beside me, the man who had held my hand through it all, the man who had loved me at my most broken, and I had known, with a certainty that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that I was finally, truly, home. Not in a physical place, but in a state of being, a state of mind, a state of heart. I had found my home in the arms of a man who loved me for who I was, in the friendship of a brother who had finally seen me, in the strength and resilience of a woman who had dared to break free from the chains of her past and to create a life that was so full of love, of joy, of purpose, that it had once seemed like an impossible dream. I had not known what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I was not afraid. I was ready to face whatever came my way, with an open heart, with a courageous spirit, with the unwavering belief that I was the author of my own story, and that I had the power to write a happy ending, an ending that was not just about finding love, but about finding myself, about finding my voice, about finding my place in the world. And as the sun had begun to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the city, I had known, with a certainty that was as